we've done. So I've got Mrs. Paul here. She has put together much of this process. So I'm going to have her go over with you what we did, what we went over with the teachers and so forth, so that you got an idea of exactly what the plans are as we move forward. We want to make the transition as it takes place next year to be a smooth transition and let it go through real, so that there's no hiccups and so forth. We've asked the staffs to identify to us, play back any hiccups that they had from the last time the move was made, so the same mistakes aren't made. And if they've got some ideas of different things that we should be looking at, to identify them so that we'll go through everything. So Michelle? And Dave?
All right, so we've given this presentation to all of the elementaries so far, and so I might be a little redundant, but I am Dave Simonson. Most of you in this room know me, with the exception of a couple maybe, and I've been elementary principal, assistant principal at the middle school, teacher at the middle school, and now working at central office in the HR department for the last year, and been very, very busy lately. So we're gonna, did you want to introduce yourself too, or?
Yes. I'm Michelle Paul, and I am currently the Executive Director for Curriculum and Instruction. Prior to that, I have been a principal out at Gaines a year here and there, as they needed me to fill in, but mostly I was 14 years as Cyrene elementary principal. And so I've been through the transition from K-5 to K-2, just as Dave was at Elms when the first transition happened, and he's been through this as well. So we are leading the charge here to really consider all of the logistics and what needs to be considered so that we can help this happen more smoothly than it did the first time with COVID and construction and all the things that happened simultaneously as we restructured. There we go. All right, so this plan, as I said, it's come out of the community meeting. Many of you are familiar faces. I'm sure you may have been at the PAC and sat in circles and gave input and ideas into the reconfiguration. And we asked about hopes and fears, concerns, you know, as we put this together. Again, we want to be proactive and we want to have lots of input, and we want everyone to give what maybe didn't go so well from their perspective if you were here the first time, so that we can do a more thorough job of planning and making this a transition forward for the better. We're not just going backwards. This is not a plan to just go backwards, because we can't. We don't have the same staff, we don't have the same students or families. There is no going back to what we had 5-6 years ago. We're moving forward. So we're using best practice research, we're using input, and putting together a plan with all of our team involved.
Okay, so this slide, we're looking at the 4 areas that we're very concerned with that came out of the discussions over at the PAC. Ensuring equity. We know that even currently our elementaries kind of have different offerings based on what side of the district you're on, and some of that develops over time. Some of that is the fact that some of them were, you know, on one side of the district we had fewer students attending, so the staffing is different, specials and things like that end up being a little bit different. And so the goal is to create equity with what we create, with what we design and what we implement moving into this new phase. So going back to a K-5 configuration, we still want to have the same programming for all and design it with that in mind so that all students are getting the same quality education and same options in what we end up designing. And so you see the transparent communication piece. That's as we go forward, we want to make sure we're transparent about what we're doing and allowing feedback to come back to us and using it to inform our decisions moving forward. And then the biggest one, I think, is that bottom right corner, providing meaningful support as we go. And that was one thing that was apparent in the last move. Not only was it during COVID, but it was very hasty and people did not feel heard, did not feel like they had support, and we want to make sure we do everything we can to provide that support during this, and that includes making sure things are moved appropriately and people understand what's going on as we make the changes that we make.
So a lot of people have asked why. Like, what is the rationale behind this decision? And so the board is asking that we make this reconfiguration back to K-5 based on a lot of family feedback, and the family logistics, I think, are kind of number one on that survey that was sent out to families, that they wanted their children that were in grades K-5 to attend the same school. They wanted to simplify drop-off and pickup, and wanted to make it easier to attend events in their children's school. And so having kids in the same school for 6 years will allow for that simplified experience for our families and our parents with the logistics, and also help them build meaningful relationships with school staff and stay longer in one place. They'll have that stability and consistency, staying in and not switching after second grade. So they'll have deeper, longer-term relationships with their teachers and their peers. Mentorship, when I was at Cyrene, one of my favorite things was our 5th grade safety patrol, and the way kids they started in 3rd and 4th grade looking up to those 5th graders and wanting to be 5th grade safety patrol, and to be able to serve as role models for those younger students to help during lunch or indoor recess or crossing guard duty, all these different opportunities and service to their school. So we really want to build on that mentorship that was so positive about the configuration prior to our K-2-3-5 split. Finally, efficient transportation. We do have our operations and transportation director here, so eliminating the shuttle system, which you've probably seen a lot about on social media. We've had a lot of criticism over the shuttle system. We want to aim to reduce the time that kids spend on buses and having to shuttle kids.
So we have a very broad timeline to operate on here. So some of this may change, but our hopes are that we can kind of follow this, and this gives us a lot of planning time, a lot more planning time, honestly, than what we had the first time we moved from the K-5 to the K-2-3-5 model. So starting now, obviously we're communicating to everybody, and we'll keep this open. But our hope is to move into this spring phase where we have all of our new routes for busing and things like that, and are able to dictate like where students are going to be going to their elementary. So you, the parents, will know where is my child going to be going to elementary school. And that will help us with staffing assignments and everything else. We told the teachers that we want to let them know by spring break where they're going to be teaching next year, so they can start to plan that direction, and all of that can start falling into place, so they're not waiting till the very end. So you, the parents, will know as well. Notification to families as soon as possible on that. So that's by spring break. That's our hope at this point. And school closure events, it's more or less like, we're not talking about closing a school, we're talking about that feeling of closure for our staff, for our students, for our parents. So we're looking to plan some of those events for each school so that people feel that sense of closure. That's underneath, I'm reading off of phase 2 spring there at the end. For the summer phase, was that me? Sorry. For the summer phase, obviously, that's where a lot of the physical transfer of items happens. And again, that's where we fell down on the last one. A lot of the move happened in haste, and things were damaged and lost, and we're going to try and make sure that that doesn't happen this time. We want it to be a well-oiled machine, organized, so we're hiring moving companies, and again, giving teachers the time to pack up their rooms, letting them know where they're going to be before spring break or shortly thereafter, with a lot of time to kind of get things packed up the right way and labeled, so that in a move, things don't get damaged and things can be put where they need to be put, and unpacking goes quicker. And then the fall, phase 4 is obviously the launch phase. So having community building activities for that new school environment that a lot of kids are going to maybe be at for the first time, to develop a sense of, ownership of the new configuration. So we will continue to support in that way. And then the bottom one on number 4 is instructional coaching and support. Obviously, we're going to keep supporting the move through the spring with our teachers and staff at the new buildings.
And just to add on, in this planning phase and logistics move phase, you'll see that based on all of the feedback that we've gotten so far, we know that we're going to have to examine, for example, our playgrounds to make sure they're appropriate and have things that are going to be of interest to K through 5, not just K through 2 or 3 through 5. So we'll be adding some playground equipment at certain playgrounds in certain buildings as needed to make that an equitable or, a similar or the same kind of experience across all 5 buildings. We also know that some of our buildings, like the 3-5 buildings, for example, they have 3D printers, because kids of that age, they use the 3D printers, whereas K2, not so much. So now that we're going to have 5 K-5 buildings, we're going to need to purchase a 3D printer for each building and make sure, again, that every child, regardless of which of the 5 buildings they go to, they have a similar experience. They have an equitable experience across that. So we are looking at all of that, and actually when we visited each building, we asked staff to let their principals know, and their principals are putting together lists for us and for the board of everything that is needed. So that is part of our planning and being proactive, rather than move and then say, oh yeah, we didn't think about, coat hooks like last time. Also, we are committed to that proactive and transparent communication. A lot's going to be on a transition hub on our website that's coming soon. That should be here by next week in February. We're also going to have a lot of these in-person events to continue to engage people face-to-face. And we're going to have like a Q&A Google form on our website, so if you don't have the answer to something, you can quickly ask your question, and within a day or 2, we'll get back to you. We're going to have a Q&A frequently asked questions document on that transition page, so that as we get the same question over and over again, we know people really need that answer. And we know, of course, for parents and families, the number one thing you want answered is, where is my child going to go? And so, as Dave said, that's our commitment, that's our goal. We're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you know before spring break where your child will be next year, so that you can plan accordingly.
Okay, with that in mind, you see the next slide there is on assignments and boundaries. We're still actively working on this, but our basic process is to try and balance the number of students going to each school. And so that does take some redistricting. This happened when we did the K2-3-5 splits. We drew some new boundaries to, because student demographics, number of students that live in a certain area changes over time. And we've seen that over the last 4 years even. So there will be some redrawing of boundaries. We've made a couple of different iterations already. I think we're on map 6 or 7 at this point. And so it's one of those things we got to keep trying, but in order to make the numbers the same or as close to equitable as possible in the buildings, we're working on that. So you see the 3 options there, or the 3 boxes there, I should say, not options. Redrawing the lines is number 1. We're trying to not redraw like crazy. It's still geographically, you know, Deke Elementary is the northwest corner of the district, and so on and so forth. But moving those boundaries a little bit in terms of our bus routes for our in-district students does help bring a little bit more equity to the different how many classrooms are at each building. So we're trying to make it 2 classrooms of each grade level at each of the 4 in-town buildings, Siring, Moorish, Elms, and Deke, and then 1 full classroom of every grade out at Gaines, which right now Gaines has 3 shared or 3 split classrooms out there. And so we're looking to add a few students to Gaines and spread a little more equally across the other buildings to ensure that we don't have larger buildings. Right now at Elms and Moorish, they're quite a bit larger section-wise than Siring and Deke. And so we're trying to even that out a little bit better. School of choice families would then be apportioned after we decide the in-district numbers, and we'll use school of choice to kind of help even out the numbers a little bit more. And so you'll see there the current families will be kept together. After district lines are drawn, school of choice families will be surveyed for building preference. Placement is based on availability, but siblings are guaranteed to be together. So a lot of that is going to be after, you know, we've gone through the numbers and kind of figured things out. We got to look at then what are our current school of choice figures and what are their preferences. And we will look at, you know, opting for in-district requests as best we can, but that needs to be, you know, priority, you know, down the road too. So we can't guarantee things, but we are going to look at that and try and opt for that to balance numbers. If we can go to the next slide real quick.
I was going to add, just as it is now, if a parent does an in-district choice to a different Swartz Creek building other than the one that they live in that boundary area, then the transportation does become the parent's responsibility. And again, it can only be approved based on space available. So we will take in those requests and process them the best we can. We always like to accommodate what people want. However, we can't, if everyone wants to stay at the building they're at, that's not going to be possible. Not going K-5. Also, if you are a school of choice family, your kids are dragons. If you're here, they're dragons. They will be placed in the district. Really important that you complete that survey. And you tell us your preferences, the people that do that sooner rather than later, or if people don't do it at all, you're going to end up placed wherever there's space at the end. So be sure to get your surveys, your preferences in.
And this is just an example map, one that we're working on. I think this is map number 6 if I'm right, but the green area is the area where students living in that section would go to Gaines. The purplish, bluish section is Moorish on the bottom, Elms on the top. You can see that the bottom is like more purple, the top is more blue, a little bit closely related. And then the red area is Siring, and the yellow area is Deke. So again, these are models that we've put together to, you know, see where can we get the most in-district numbers. This is not hard and fast right now, but we are working toward getting equitable numbers of in-district students. So we'll keep working with that, and that's Bill and Transportation has done a great job of working through different options, but that's the work that we're doing right now.
And also just to note that any of these, we're keeping in mind transportation has to be able to get the bus run there in 30 minutes or less is what our target is. So we've intentionally drawn this in a way that will allow that to be true for every student, to have 30 minutes or less on the bus. Our special programs will have to switch a little bit, and some will stay where they're at. So Deke Elementary is going to be our early 5 kindergarten center. When we had K-5 before, we could not have a K-5 dedicated classroom in every one of the 5 buildings because we just didn't have the numbers for that. So if you have a child and you want early 5s, it's available, and they can even still bus if you're within the district. They would bus to Elms, Moorish, Gaines, or Cyrene, and then shuttle to early 5s at Deke. We haven't been able to eliminate shuttles completely, but it is really going back to what we used to do at Cyrene. We did not have an early 5s program in my building because Cyrene is smaller than Deke, and so our early 5 students, we would carefully get them, an aide would get them off the bus, put them on the shuttle, and they would go to Deke, and then when they came back, an aide would carefully get them off the early 5 shuttle and put them on their regular bus home. Elms will have 2 self-contained programs. Those are special education, and it's based on the needs of the students. So we aren't sure yet. Derek Bouchon, our special ed director and student services coordinator, is looking at the needs of our students currently. And it could be for students who have some cognitive impairments. It could be for autistic children that are significantly impacted by their autism. So there'll be 2 self-contained at Elms, and there'll be 2 self-contained at Moorish. And that has to do with transportation also, because they often require specialized transportation. And we also are going to add, because our Little Dragons program is full and has to turn parents down every year because we don't have enough classrooms. So with this reconfiguration, Morris should have enough space, and Ms. Bendel plans to add 1 or 2 GSRP, the pre-kindergarten classrooms. Gaines houses currently 2 Head Start classrooms, and those will continue to be housed out at Gaines like they are now. And then all of our students, would be assigned either based on their neighborhood school where they live, or with school of choice based on the preferences in the surveys and where there is space available.
Be real brief, because I think Michelle already said this. We're trying for bus rides under 30 minutes for the kids. And then the start and end times will probably adjust and be common across the district rather than the staggered start times that we have now for upper and lower elementary. So we haven't come out with that yet, and it'll be negotiated and in the SCEA contract, but probably somewhere in the middle of those 2 or very close to the probably in the middle, because we can't go much earlier or any earlier than that, just to accommodate the bus run for the middle and high school. So your start time for elementary school probably somewhere in the 8:15 to 8:20 range, like it used to be.
And also by contract, there's an ideal class size that we are shooting for. Again, we're using this reconfiguration as an opportunity to improve our students' academic success and their opportunities for learning. And we know that the smaller class sizes are very helpful, both for the social emotional support, and especially at that young age of kindergarten. So we're going to shoot for those ideal class sizes. By contract, if we go over the max class size, we have to pay overloads, but we really don't. Again, we're looking at our priorities and our values, and we know that putting more than 30 kids in a K-5 classroom is not what's best for kids, right? So we're really working to keep things balanced.
I kind of laugh when I get put on this type of slide. Some of my employees in this room know that I don't smile very much or show much emotion. But anyway, we are going to be sensitive about this with our students, and we're going to work with our staff to allow your students to have, you know, the time and space they need for changes and stuff like that. It hits a lot of people differently. It hits our staff differently, depending on who they are and times and things like that. So Michelle had put in here closure ceremonies, that idea of the feeling of closure, story walls, digital memory books. I didn't write those. I wouldn't do those because I am me. But some people need those things, and so we'll allow time and space for those things leading up to the end of the school year to honor the past. And those things were lacking in the last move, and we knew that. So welcoming the future, meeting teacher nights, campus tours, those kind of things. We're gonna plan those events. We've talked about what does that look like for, okay, if we all know where we're going in the future, and some people are going to a different school, maybe we have time before the end of the year to load kids up and do a field trip to their new school. We haven't thought through all of that yet, or what does that look like, but maybe that's something we do. So we're going to look at those things to welcome the future, and definitely back to school nights, we're going to, you know, we'll have an open house and an intro to those new schools. And then moving forward into next year, check-ins and things like that to make sure that we are honoring people's needs in terms of their emotional needs. And we've been doing that all along. The SEL focus has not gone away since, you know, we started it even pre-COVID. So
We want to ensure that every child feels welcomed and valued and has friends and a support system in their new school. And I'm in charge of what I called the human-centered transition, because as Dave said, you know, we have our different talents, so he can be more the logistical and I can help with more the human side. So before and after care will continue to be at Cyrene and Moorish. Those are currently our licensed sites. So Cyrene or Moorish students will stay on site, and then students from Deep Gaines or Elms will need to be shuttled to one of those two sites for before or after care, or shuttled, you know, from there to their school in the morning. But regardless of assignment, there will be that opportunity for before and after care at any of the schools.
okay, these are some of the questions that have come up already that we, you know, have addressed or will be addressing as we move forward. But what does specials look like? And that was one thing that came up when we were at the PAC. A lot of families are like, well, we want the 5 specials that we currently have. And for those of you that are, you know, specials are the art, music, gym, STEM, and tech. Not all school districts offer 5 specials. In fact, some don't even offer more than 2. And sometimes 1 is all they can offer. And so we really, when we went to this model of K235, we found that we were able to offer 5 specials. Before that, it was 3 specials. And so to offer all 5 like that and to do it in a meaningful way has been a benefit, we feel, to our students, and parents have liked it. So we want to keep that going as we move back. And so we have to work out how that looks. It'll be a rotation of some sort, and our specials teachers that are currently in those spots have already started to come up with ideas for how that might look. And so we have some ideas there, but we're looking at how to best offer that and keep that alive. And so we do plan to commit to offering those specials. Let's see. The start of school, meaning the start of the actual school year, we're gonna work our best to push it a little bit later than it's been in the last couple of years. It's been creeping further and further into August and had these, you know, really short, like 1.5 days of school to start the school year and that. So it's probably gonna be closer to Labor Day, although I don't anticipate it'll be after Labor Day, just because we've got to get the days in. And we don't want to go too late in June next year. So we'll be working with the teachers union to negotiate the calendar, as we always do, and hope to get that date out soon. But with bond work and everything else, as it states there, there's a lot of work going on in the buildings, and we're going to try and get it as close to Labor Day as possible. So it'll be expect at least a week or 2 later in August than what we've been doing. And then summer school, at this point, we are not going to be able to offer physical summer school based on what we're seeing, just with all the bond work going on at the different buildings and the move. So there may be a virtual option. We have not confirmed that yet, but it won't be like it's been the last couple of years.
And so, as Dave mentioned earlier, we are contracting with professional movers to help this go better than the last time we had our own people all trying to move things. Things were packed in random boxes from, that you get from Sam's Club or the grocery store or what have you, rather than professional boxes. There weren't labels with barcodes telling us where things needed to land, and so they sometimes landed in the wrong building or the wrong room or the wrong closet and weren't found until later. So we definitely know what we need to do differently, and we are planning accordingly. Like I talked about earlier, the playgrounds, but also things like tech, STEM labs, libraries. We're going to make sure those are all updated and added to. So if they're in the K2, we got to add in the 3-5 things that 3-5 kids need. And if they're 3-5 buildings, we have to add in the things that K2 folks need. So we are collaborating with all the building principals across the district throughout this whole springtime and really taking into account all of these things, planning together, planning schedules, master schedules that will look very similar across all 5 buildings. So key dates for you. Right now we've already pushed out, it's not even February yet, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is nice. We pushed out our staff preference surveys, so they are letting us know their preferences as far as grade level they want to teach or subject, what building they would like to be in, who they collaborate well with as a teaching partner, those kinds of things. So we're giving them lots and lots of input into what they would like to see. And then again, we're going to have to try to balance all that out and staff all 5 buildings. Our target is to let them know their assignments also by spring break, so that as soon as we come back, we can hit the ground running, knowing the direction that we're all going. Mid-April is when we're going to have our kindergarten roundup event at the Cage, like we normally do. So if you have incoming kindergartners or early 5 kindergarten, that will be mid-April. In May, school, again, we're not closing, all 5 buildings will be open in the fall, but they're going to be different. They're going to have different staff, they're going to have different students, they're going to have different families. So it truly is closing all 5 of our buildings and reopening 5 new buildings. So we will have new student orientations, campus tours, open houses, plural, not just the one we normally have right before school starts. Giving people those opportunities to help their children transition.
That one's you too.
Ah.
You took mine.
Oh, sorry.
I can do that if you want.
I get on a roll. Okay. So we are partnering with our families. Like I said, we're going to have that online transition center that you can keep checking, and we'll update weekly or every time we have anything new. We're not holding anything back. There's no secrets. Everything we know, you know. We want to hear people's ideas. We've already improved on our plan just since last week, going around and talking to all the teachers in every building. We are continuing to listen, take input, and this plan will continue to evolve based on people's input. And there'll be lots of welcoming school connections and trying to work to better engage our families and our parents in these new buildings and these new cultures. We know after the pandemic, it didn't feel welcoming. Parents were not welcomed back, as with all of the things, the masks and the 6-foot distancing and all the regulations and laws and things we were having to follow. And so it was really hard to build a family culture in our buildings right after the last configuration. So again, we're going to do better this time and really work on building those connections.
and this is, I mean, I think Michelle has already kind of said this, we will have the transition hub up soon, so you can go there for frequently asked questions and, you know, figure out what are the answers to the questions that you might have. But keep watching and listening for these events and things, so you can be informed, and we will continue to give feedback. I mean, you can email Michelle or I, and we can get back to you directly, or hopefully the principals will have all of this information too and can answer you questions as time goes on.
We're going to be keeping track of some measures of success. We're going to be looking at our enrollment, since that was one of our main goals in doing this, is that we keep balance and that we keep those student-to-teacher ratios balanced across the 5 buildings. It's not fair for your kids or for staff if we have 33 in a classroom in 5th grade at one building and we have 13 in a classroom in 5th grade at another building. So we are really working to balance things. Staffing and capacity. One of the biggest challenges facing school districts across the nation right now is filling open positions. So as our teachers retire or resign, we're going to have to really work at that. I think Dave, as HR director, will have a busy summer this summer, and with our support staff as well. I've heard of many reaching that stage where they're ready to retire or move on and do something different. So that's going to be a really big challenge. So Swartz Creek is a great place to work. Spread the word. We are going to, and watch our employment pages, because we will be having openings. Operations readiness, we're going to look at facilities. Are they ready to go when it's time to open school? Transportation performance. Did we meet that 30-minute or less mark that we're shooting for? Not day one, Bill, I promise, but we'll give a couple days for the drivers to learn their routes. Culture and climate, we are constantly surveying students and families and staff and really looking at those results. Our attendance trends. Hopefully you've noticed we're talking about every dragon every day. Attendance is really important. So we want to keep an eye on our attendance trends, and we're going to look at that. When I say hotline, I mean like that Q&A document, Google form, that usage, that engagement with our website, your engagement on Facebook when we're posting information and so forth. How well are we doing at communication?
So just a kind of quick wrap up here before we do offer a question and answer. I think I've been thinking about this for a while. When we moved off of the K-5 model, there was a lot of, what ifs, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger from parents, from teachers, staff. And now that we're making a change back, it's interesting that we have about the same amount of anxiety and frustration and anger the other direction. And so it says a few things to me. I mean, I think that the K-5 model was obviously a very traditional, great model, and it served this community for a long time, and it serves a lot of communities all over the place. I have no trouble moving back to it. I think it's good. It was hard to move away from it. What we have now isn't perfect, but it's not bad. I would have no trouble staying with what we're doing. But I guess I would say this. I'm excited about getting back to that community schools feel, because before we had a lot of, school, pride, and we currently have that, but it's couple years, then we move on, a couple more years. It's not quite the same as that 5 years. This move is good for families, and I think once we get into it, even though the change is hard, it's going to be good. And I think we're going to re-identify some of those things that we were missing with that. So I'm encouraged by it, and I think we'll get there. It's just we're going to take care of it this time and work hard to be as responsive as possible.
Yes, and I think that family engagement piece, you know, when we didn't have as many years in a row, it's harder. I think parents step back, you know, from being in the buildings, and like I said earlier, I think that was compounded greatly by the pandemic and all of the laws and not being able to have, you know, 50 people in a room for parties and things like that. So we're looking forward to more engagement of our family and community in these new settings. So stay tuned. And with that, we'll invite, I'm going to have Dave, walk around. If you have questions, anything you'd like to ask or communicate, any ideas, thoughts?
Okay, thank you. One of my questions, super quick, is as far as the building survey as in regards to preference for school of choice and then in-district parents. What is the planned timeline for that to come out comparatively to when teachers are given assignments and when parents know? I think there are a lot of parents that are looking for specific relationships with certain teachers. I know personally for me, I have a special ed student who that relationship piece is going to be extremely important in maintaining. I won't want to fill out a preference survey until I know who is going to be at what building, just because that's what's going to be best for my child. So I'm interested to find out the timeline on that.
Thanks for saying that, because since we haven't created that survey yet, that would be a good question, Dave, as you and I create that, to add and say, are there particular staff where you wouldn't care which building, but you really want your child to stay with their current case manager or whatever for special ed? So we'll add that question. No, other than it's going to be fairly soon before, like I said, we already pushed out the teacher survey first, early. We're trying to actually be ahead of our timeline to anticipate any, bumps in the road along the way and still meet our goal. So.
This might be a logistical nightmare. Bill Loder might not let me sit next to him again for suggesting this, but have we thought about, for like the students that started at Moorish in K2, and now they're third grade at Elms, so next year they're going to go back to Moorish. Have we thought about an option where we could maybe do an extra class or two at Elms to keep those kids at Elms instead of transitioning back? Do you see what I'm saying? Like the third graders this year at Elms that would go to Moorish maybe could stay at Elms for 2 more years. And it's probably a logistical nightmare. But I'm just saying, that is that an option to not get those kids back and forth, right? If they should go back to Moorish.
Well, and that is why we're going to have that in-district choice.
Okay.
There's no guarantees, though, because we have to balance our classes and we have to balance our buildings. What we have had, just because I know some of you may not be aware, what we have had for many years now is a couple of buildings that are way over full. Moorish and Elms have had like 450 plus kids. And we have had other buildings that have, maybe only 300 to 350 or even like 250. And when you have that big of a discrepancy, each building still only has one principal. Each building still only has one social worker. Each building, and I could go on and on, right? So in order to make it equitable for students, we have to balance, and that's probably going to mean some people are going to have to change buildings who don't want to. But if parents are willing to transport and they want to do that choice form, and if there's room, then certainly those students could stay at Elms.
Our plan also is to have 2 of each grade in the 4 buildings here and one one in each grade at Gaines, because we're going to have 9 sections, we figure, 9 sections of kindergarten, 9 sections of first grade, and so on and so on. So we want to try to make it so the buildings are even as much as we can. By doing that, we can get as much equity across education. I understand change is difficult, and a lot of times when you change, it takes a little bit of time, but I really think that you'll find out that the change will be much smoother this time. I got 2 very seasoned administrators here that know very much about, they're both strong elementary individuals, and they know exactly what needs to take place. That's why so much of the planning's been taking place right now, is they know what needs to be done. They know what didn't go right last time, and are making sure what went wrong last time isn't duplicated again. And we got some teachers, we were asking the teachers that if something went wrong last time, please remind us to make sure so we don't, same mistakes aren't made again.
I've got several questions. I'll just start with the first one. So you mentioned that we're not going backwards, we're just basically going back to the same model, but it's going to be better. How specifically is it going to be better than it was before? Like, what's going to be different about the new way that makes it better?
So, speaking from experience, one of the things that makes it better is getting rid of the large discrepancy in numbers so that students have similar services available to them, no matter what their building is. You know, we have a system where, depending on where a child is going to school, they are getting probably a vastly different experience. For example, out at Gaines, we have a kindergarten and first grade classroom combined. That's hard on everybody, right? I think everyone can recognize that's probably not the best idea, but the numbers are very small. Also, back in the day, I remember Deke having similar struggles. They were kind of rural, being northwest, just like Gaines being southwest, and Deke struggled. And year to year, they might have not quite enough students in a particular grade, and so there'd be splits. A 1-2 split one year, a 3-4 split one year, the next year, and so on. Those teachers, right now, they have a lot of new curriculum and a lot of new things that they're learning to improve instruction, and they're doing great at it, but to ask them to do double, to learn 2 grades worth of new math curriculum, 2 grades worth of reading and writing curriculum, that's just not physically possible in a 24-hour day. So, you know, there are a lot of things that we recognize were done in the past for, quite frankly, financial reasons, and the board is committed to making this change in a positive direction and funding whatever needs we have.
Couldn't balancing these students be done without reconfiguring the schools, though?
It absolutely could.
And how is it easier to provide equitable services to each school when you're moving from 2 or 3 schools that need those services to now having 5 different schools? How's that easier?
Well, I didn't necessarily say it was easier. I said that we're making lemonade out of lemons, and in this transition, we're building in a lot of proactive strategies and really defining our priorities in this move, right? So I get it. You know, I like the configuration that we're in. It helps in many, many ways. Also, like Dave, though, I liked having K-5. I liked the relationships I had with students. You know, I still have students visit me because I was their principal for the first 6 years of their education, and you develop relationships differently than when you're just there for a few years.
I agree with you. I was very much against the reconfiguration when it happened the last time for some of the reasons Dave mentioned. You know, a lot of anxiety, what ifs. Now that we've made that transition, you can kind of see that it's really not better or worse. It's just different pros, different cons. To be honest, I don't see a lot attracting me to move back to a K-5 model. Although Dave may have sold me with the school pride and the family feel, because I definitely agree that seems to be missing. But most of the reasons that I've heard for why we're moving back, you know, as they were brought up during this meeting, is transportation, logistics, things that don't necessarily impact a student's ability to learn. Yes, if they're on the bus a long time, that can definitely impact it. We don't want them tired when they're getting to school. But the model that we have seems to be better for making sure that we can have equitable resources amongst as many students as possible. So I know there's not too many people in this room that could answer the question, but I would like to know what metrics the board was looking at when they decided that the K-5 model is better than what we have today. And also, did they look at the cost that it, you know, we heard about professional movers, did they look at the cost that it's going to take to switch back? We're basically doubling our cost. We spent it in 2020, now we're spending it again. For what benefit?
Right, okay, so thank you for sharing all that. I mean, it's important because I'm sure that people watching at home and the people that watch this recording later on, they're going to have the same thoughts. So it's anyone who has an idea, a thought, a question, please don't hold back. We want to get as much information as we can out there. Quite frankly, because we're committed to transparency, the board made this decision, not administration. So the board decides what, as in policy or what the configuration is and so on, and they vote for that. Then administration, we determine the how. So we're working out all the details of how to do this. So if you have specific questions for the board, I would suggest you come back Wednesday night to the board meeting. I can answer a little bit because I've been at all the board meetings and I've heard the board in their deliberations and so forth. So I know that there was a survey sent out back in the fall when we were still kind of trying to figure out what to do about Moorish and the mega site and the 40 million offer. And K-5 families, well, I shouldn't say that. People who answered the survey, which included K-5 families and others, voted, more voted to go back to a K-5 than to stay in our current configuration. And I do think there's been a lot of complaints from families. I think that it is hard for parents because you're not, and this is where we went wrong, quite frankly, I'll admit it, in my opinion, and I think not including our families and our parents into our buildings as much as we possibly could really backfired because parents don't understand what this new configuration does or how it benefits their children. And so from their perspective, it just made life harder, right? I get it. It's two different buildings to run to for parties and conferences and drop-off and pickup and all the things. So at this point, in order to make this happen by fall of 2026, administrators have to have a plan and we have to get moving. We can't continue to think about it or, wait and see. We have to move. So I hope that helps.
That's all right. In regards to a question I had, as well as something that gentleman had asked, I'm wondering, as far as the cost, how are we as a district ensuring that the massive cost of this move will not impact our children? How are we ensuring, like, where is the money for all the movers and all the things that are going to have to take place coming from? Is that coming from our general fund? How are we going to prevent the loss of that money from impacting our students in regards to the loss of programs, in regards to the loss of the ability to hire staff because our general fund is reduced and we have a percentage that we're trying to keep it at? How is the district going to commit to making sure that this move doesn't impact our children, not just next year? I mean, obviously it's impacting, right? But financially, not just this year, but in 2 years or in 3 years or in 4 years down the road, when we've taken so much out of whatever fund it's coming from, to cover what appears to me, and of course I'm not an expert, but a massive cost in a move that is not, it's not. I understand there was a survey and that slightly over a majority voted for it, of, as you mentioned, anybody who answered, not necessarily K-5 parents who this was actually impacting, but somebody who had a child, a senior, that only experienced K-5 and had no idea what the K-2, 3, 5 system was. I'm very concerned with the long-term impact of this choice to use all of this money out of our funds, and how that will impact our students.
We are going to be tracking our expenses and the budget and reporting that to the board. There have not been, up to this point, any estimates or any particular budget amount decided upon. We have a very healthy fund equity, which is our savings or our rainy day fund. And so I don't really think that there's a concern about spending this money. A lot of it will be one-time costs. Down the road, if our enrollment continues to decline, it will be very difficult financially to support fully support 5 buildings. But again, that's if, right? Like if our enrollment declines greatly, or if the board were to no longer accept school of choice, then different decisions would probably have to be made about maintaining the expense of 5 principals, 5 secretaries, 5 of everything.
I don't see massive costs as you put out. About half the teachers are going to stay in the same buildings that they're in. Because if I got a K-1-2 building, I still have to have 2K, 2 first, 2 second grades in that building. It'll be from the 3-5 or from the 4-5 building, they're going to have to come down, a 3-4-5 building, come down. I was a financial business manager in a district for 9 years in one of my previous jobs. And the cost that we're going to see is not a cost increase in staffing, because we're going to keep the same level of staff. If we were to decline in enrollment and so forth, and we ever had to, thank God, or hope God we don't ever have to close a building or something, it would be the same as if we were in the same configuration. We'd have to go from 5 to 4. I don't see that happening. I see us at least maintaining our population as much as we can. But I don't see massive costs. There's going to be some costs when we talk maybe some printers, maybe some playground equipment. Maybe we move some of the playground equipment that got moved last time back to the buildings that they were at. There's going to be some costs, but I don't see it being massive costs. And again, like I said, we're not going to increase staff. So usually about 85% of your school cost for the year is your staffing, is your salaries and benefits. We shouldn't change that at all. We don't think it's not going to increase our staffing that we have across the district.
Okay. Thank you. I think some of the concern too comes from the minor things, you know, like moving this and adding this and making sure we have curriculum at all 5 buildings instead of just 2 or 3, and making, you know, those little things, and they do tend to add up, I think, way more than we probably realize. But I appreciate your expertise and your thought on that.
We've got curriculum, and, you know, the same curriculum will go from Deke to Elms to Tyrene to Gaines and so on. So the curriculum should not have to change. Like I said, our staffing is the biggie, and that's going to stay the same. We're just going to move them around a little bit.
So with staffing, how do we plan to compensate teachers who are moved? Because that time, I don't want them to be taking time away from, like, my child in the classroom. And how are we going to maintain that sense of normalcy for our kids when their teachers are packing up in, you know, are we offering stipends for them to pack up in the summer so that's not impacting students? How are we going to manage to do that, as far as, I think it's really important that teachers are compensated for their time, especially with what we know most who have come forward are not happy with this. And as you mentioned, some are not going to be happy with moving. It's going to be important that we honor them by compensating, but also making sure that that's not taking away from the end of the year education of our students.
That's a piece we're talking with the union with. We are going to provide some types of stipends. Like I said, half of the teachers aren't going to have to move.
Right.
They may pack up their book. They may have to pack up their rooms and go from room A to room B. And I was a teacher for 19 years. We've had to pack up and go from room to room before, and wherever I've been, we've always changed. We've had a lot of changes in different classrooms. So we are not going to expect that the teachers will be taking away from your educational setting right now to pack up. We're going to give them extra time. We'll do some type of a stipend for them, but it'll be something that we negotiate through the union, because we just can't provide them with a stipend of a certain amount, that this is X and that's Y and so forth. It has to be negotiated with the teachers union. That is what we have to do by law. Okay.
I appreciate the focus on equity, because the district hasn't been, I don't want to say fair, because that sounds like I'm whining, but the offerings between different buildings in our district have not been equitable in my years here. What's offered at Elms hasn't been offered at Deke, and it's become much more equitable in the last couple of years. I'm concerned about the cost. We just redid Syring's playground for a K-2 building. PTO raised thousands and thousands of dollars. My child is a student at Deke who has seen nothing. They have a dome climber and swings and a gaga ball pit. So there's nothing at Deke for K-2 kids. And I know it's on the docket for this summer, but they've really been at a disservice for the years that they've been there. The outside has not been touched. But you saying that the teachers, half of them aren't going to move, they are, because you're going to have to move classrooms. And I understand a move from one room to another is different than their belongings being loaded on a truck and driven across town. So I do appreciate that. I worry about the cost of the moving, the fact that, you know, you've got buildings that playgrounds aren't appropriate for kids that will be there. And I also worry about the staff. We're assuming that the staff's all going to stay. And there's been a lot of discussion. We have a lot of young, new teachers, lots of them. Entire grade levels at my child's school are less than 2 years in the district. I worry about them because they're not bought in and they see what's going on. And that makes me nervous in that there's all these new staff that, you know, don't have the support of having years and years of relationships, or, hey, I did this, 5 years ago and we'll get through it. It just makes me nervous. And the cost of training new people is way more than maintaining what you have. That's documented all over, that if you can maintain your staffing, it is so more cost efficient. But I worry more about the cost. We hear all about it at board meetings of, well, we've got funding for this or not this, or I worry about where the money's going to come from, even with a healthy slush fund. I think it's more that what's being marketed as far as what's going to need to happen to make it truly successful for all those kids. Because we could make some of these adjustments by redrawing lines instead of busing staff. Are people going to be happy with that? No, but since I moved into the district 10 years ago, there's been so many lines drawn sneaking kids from gains. I mean, and it's been done kind of blatantly here. Oh, well, now we hear there's 80 kids there, but it's because it's been done. Elms and Moorish are overloaded, but if you move a line, you can make them not as overloaded. It's a manufactured overloading that could be addressed in other ways. But I worry more about the financial stuff, and I'm excited for the equity, as long as you're going to have 5 3D printers with teachers that know how to use them and teach them. And you're going to have 5 Lego robotics clubs at $400 per kit. And a teacher and or parapro that's going to be willing to come in before school or after school, so that all 5 of those buildings have equity. That's what worries me.
Thank you, Michelle. We talked about a lot of this with the staff when we visited each building last week. And one of the things we talked about is negotiating with the union to have more elementary Schedule B positions, so that our elementary folks would be compensated, and we can ensure that someone at each building would be willing to step up to do just what you're saying. It's not okay that one building has safety patrol but the other 4 don't, or one building has, service opportunities. It doesn't necessarily have to be Blueberries or a particular brand of service, but all the upper L kids should have an opportunity to be part of a service club or student council or all these things. So we are going to work together as a K-5 team. We got all brand new principals last year, so this is their second year. They are much more collaborative and much more in sync and understanding, because I've mentored them from the word go, that we have to give those similar opportunities across the district. So we're looking at all those things that you're talking about. But I love that you're bringing them up, because if we ever missed anything, we definitely want to hear ideas and make sure we're proactively addressing those things. We're also worried about our staff. That's why we went and visited our buildings first. We took this presentation and our message to the teachers first, so they would hear it directly from us and be able to give their input and ask their questions. And you're right, they're nervous and they love the family. We have 5 core values here in Creek, and one of them is family. And that doesn't mean just our biological family. We love our families of our students, but we as a staff are family. And when Cyrene went from K-5 to K-2, half my family was moved. And that was hard. That was hard for me, and that was hard for them. And I got text messages for years asking if I had positions open in my building, or if, they could come back, or how much they missed me as their principal and stuff. And that's not to say anything bad about another principal or another building or what have you. It's just, we are family. So that's why this plan is, I'm in charge of the human-centered side of things because I want to ensure that we build people up, we build those family connections, we build that sooner than later. We don't just let those things happen by accident, because they are what's going to keep those teachers here. I do professional development with our new Dragons, which are our new teachers across the district, and they just rave about our district and where they're at and the people and how welcoming and the mentors that they have. So on the staff survey, that was one of the questions Dave was sure to ask is, if you're a new teacher, and if so, who's your mentor? You know, so that we can try to keep people together.
Going off of a little bit of what you said and a little bit of what she said as well, I hear a lot about the funding and the staff concerns and everything that it's going to take to do the transition. But what I'm thinking about is the children. What about the children's concerns? How are the children going to emotionally feel when it comes to making this transition for those that have been in the district? Is there a survey that has been given out to the children to see if this is something that they would actually like to as a transition? And I ask this because we've been in the district for years. I've had siblings who've graduated in the district. My husband and I have 7 children in the district right now. And they range from elementary to middle school. So we have children that are getting ready to come into kindergarten. We have few that will be in the 3-5. And the way that we've transitioned over the years, the teachers that we've built those connections with over the years that we are looking forward to our students coming up with, they're in separate buildings. We can't guarantee that they're going to see these same teachers, have those connections with these same teachers that we've already built that rapport with. So how are we as the adults here that are making these decisions for these children, taking the children into consideration with the rapport that they've built with those teachers as well, if that makes sense?
Totally does, yeah. We haven't, because they are K-5. If it was middle school or high school, I think we'd be more inclined to survey students. We usually tend to try to keep the more adult decisions and issues away from our K-5 students. But I know that's hard. But there may be parents and families who aren't even talking to their kids about this yet. So someone talked about not letting this impact the education. I think our teachers, you know, they're not talking about this with their students and so forth yet. Now, when it gets closer, you know, in May, that's when we're going to use our social workers, use our student success coordinators. We're going to use all of our activities to help kids through that process. And for some, it will be like, no big deal. Oh, I'll have some of my same friends and I'll make new friends. For some, it's going to be kind of a grieving process. It's going to be a really big deal and a really hard transition. And those are the ones that we'll have to have some special planning around with our principals and our social workers and our student success coordinators and with parents. So let's add that to the family surveys, that if they feel like their child is going to need that extra TLC, that we get those sooner than later.
And I also think that some of these children, when they switch from one building to another, they're going to come up with some great relationships with the new teachers they come in with another building. We have teachers across the district that are great teachers. And I think that if one of the older siblings had to create a relationship with this teacher, when they go to another building, they're going to find a great relationship with that teacher. I also heard that we have a lot of young teachers in the district. It's a lot easier to move from building to building if you've only been in a building a couple years than if you'd been in a building 15 years. If you've been in a building 15 years, you don't want to move. And if you've been there 1 or 2 or 3 years, it's a whole lot easier to move at that point.
So first, I see 2 board members here. I just want to thank them for taking time out of their night to actually come and hear our voices. So definitely appreciate both of you. I know it's just a proposed or one possible map, but could you put the map of the boundaries back up there? It was really difficult to see like what the roads were that were kind of the
Right,
borders.
and we won't just put out a map. When this is finalized, we'll put out a whole list like we normally do of streets and addresses, and then it'll say what building. So transportation, once they've finalized the areas and the runs and so forth, then we'll be able to give out a lot more detail, which is why I did, I caution you, this is just one possible.
It's not final.
Right, right.
And if I can just real quick show you, this is Miller Road, right here. So you see that Moorish is this pink building, Elms. This is Elms Road, Moorish Road. So, I know you're not going to see the roads, but I'm just showing you the breakdown of that. And so,
Thank you, that helps.
One of the benefits that has been discussed with the K-2, 3, 5 model is that ability to kind of specialize in those grade levels. I'm wondering if we have plans to provide any support of it, any type of additional support or training for staff members as they transition. There are definitely staff who have taught in a K-5 building or have taught older grades or lower grades, but as been mentioned, some of our staff are new. Some of our staff, some of our support staff, our SSPs, things like that, have only taught in one type of school, in a K-2 school or a 3-5, and interacting with the kindergarten first grader. Just from as a parent, my first grader is very different than my fourth grader, and that's just a few years. And my fourth grader is an entirely different human being than when he was in kindergarten, who he was in kindergarten. So I'm wondering if we have plans for additional training and supports as staff expand their repertoire of systems that they're going to put in place to work with students of many different grade levels versus that ability to just specialize in those smaller grade level ranges.
100%. So we have a summer institute. We haven't set out dates yet and that sort of thing, but I've actually done professional development for our support staff every summer. I usually do a couple days worth of refreshers around positive behavior supports and restorative practices and all the, playground supervision. And we have bus drivers and cooks and all kinds of people that come, secretaries, all of our support staff have attended it very well. So even though we can't require it, we pay them and bring in lunch for them and, make it an attractive experience. So definitely going to have more of that with this change than we normally would. And teachers, the same thing. In fact, if a teacher has to change a grade level, which we're trying to avoid that, because as I said, we have brought in so much training around our brand new curriculums, being a reader, being a writer, number corner, bridges, that a lot of teachers, I've already kind of peeked at some of the teacher preference surveys as they come through on my email, and a lot of them are like, just don't move me grade levels because I don't want to have to start over and learn a new curriculum. So we get that. And I've always been one as a principal. Unless I had to for some reason or another, I really tried to leave my teachers in the grade they were in because I feel like you become an expert, you know, in your curriculum and in that grade level, and you form those relationships with your teaching partner and so forth. So we are trying to honor as much of that as possible, and they still need more training. Even if we weren't doing this move, teachers need a lot more training because everything's fairly new with our curriculum. So there will definitely be, all at once. So there will definitely be extra days of professional development that teachers may attend for pay. In addition to our first day back for PD, we usually have a PD day before the first start of school, as you know. And we have already told teachers that that will be dedicated to letting them go to their new buildings and do some team building, some get to know you activities, that sort of thing, because, you know, we're not going to try to throw content at them when we know they just want to make sure their classroom's ready to welcome in their new students and get to know everyone in their hallway and in the office that they're building and all of that. So we're really going to plan professional development kind of differently for that opening day based on what we know teachers are going to need.
So I know there was some feedback about the teachers and bonds. So I only experienced K-5. So I actually, when this idea came out, my son was heading in 6th grade. I thought it was a great idea because of the bonds that they would get as classmates, right? Like he got to middle school and he was in classrooms with kids he had never met in elementary. And he came from Elms, which had sorry, I need some water, but he came from Elms, and Elms had 3 classrooms of kids, so he knew a lot of kids through those years. But we got to middle school, and he still ended up in classrooms with kids he didn't know. So I looked at it from a different perspective, socially, from a child standpoint, as well as parents. Thank you very much. It's very dry in here. From the parent standpoint, and I've had this conversation with people about the PTOs, because I know we have blended PTOs. So with the blended PTOs, it being a problem. And it hit me tonight, part of the problem, because I noticed this in middle school. When we got to middle school, and I did PTO there, coming from Elms, and like Dave said, I mean, Elms ruled. I mean, we were the best elementary school. We were very family-oriented. I know a couple people in here from Elms, and there was always that competition of which elementary school was the best, and so we were very much a family because we were together for 6 years. And that bond my son had with his 4th and 5th grade teacher, he knew those teachers for 4 and 5 years before he got to those classrooms, right? So he got to know those teachers, and me as a parent and as a community member, I got to know teachers my kid never had, right? There was this bond with, because we were together for 6 years, and we were very oriented, and we did the fall parties, and I've heard, because again, I haven't experienced it, that hasn't been the same, right, since you've broke up a little bit. So the family piece of it, I feel, really has lacked a lot, right? And I got that literally about a week before we did this vote. I had a teacher say to me, almost in tears, full-blown tears, she was very upset about how much she disliked it, right? Because she came from that family environment at Elms, and now she's over at Moorish, and just having that perspective. And she's a 20-plus year teacher, right? And just having the ability of having the older kids be with the younger kids. They don't have that anymore, and how she really missed that, and how different it was, even the interaction with the kids. So, but being in the middle school and seeing how few parents came out and helped compared to the parent support in elementary, I was like, wow, this is different, right? Because we had a fabulous PTO at Elms. Parents came out and did all these things, and I thought, we're no different than our kids, right? All of a sudden, we know less parents. I knew parents, you know, years around my kids' age, right? Because we were together for 6 years. And we get to middle school, and now we've blended 5 elementary buildings, right? So now I only know 20% of the parents, roughly, right? So parents didn't come out to help as much, I noticed. And so when this idea came about, I thought, wow, what a great way for kids to know more kids and parents to know more parents, right? You're kind of with the same parent group for 3 years and you move on to 3 years. Maybe it would make them tighter and we would know more people, right? Because that's just how we are. The more people you know, you're going to go and do the volunteer events. So I saw a different side of it and that perspective, and maybe it would be helpful. The key points that I thought would be great with this plan was the STEAM labs. You know, there is an expense, right? Now we have to make our STEAM labs accountable or accommodating for 6th grade levels, our libraries for 6th grade levels, all those things. So there is a huge expense. And I will tell you, Ben, we had no information in front of us when we made this decision. It was very much a quick decision, which you all know if you watched the meeting. And it was also in the conversation that we were going to do this very backwards, and we would look at the numbers after the fact. You know, and that we would look at the opportunities and possibly even push it back if it logistically and financially wasn't going to make sense to do it this year. We haven't really done that yet, so hopefully we bring that up at the next meeting, but that was the conversation, is we would do this and then go back and look at numbers. So there is a lot to look at. I'm very honestly split down the middle because there is a lot of opportunity, I think, with the busing. We've got issues there, all the shuttling. We've got some accommodations. I love the family aspect of K through 5. I think it explores a lot of options for us as well, but we do still have some homework. We have no idea what the numbers look like. We have no idea financially what this is going to cost us. So personally, I feel like we have to honestly look at some things a little more big picture to really, kudos to all of you trying to make this happen. But I think we as a board have no idea what this is going to cost us financially to truly have this done and have it done by fall of 25.
26.
26, thank you. I have not
It's
adjusted
still
that.
it's still
2026
January.
yet.
Thanks, Andrea. I want to thank Mr. Wright for being the leader on board here, and also Michelle and Dave and Bill and Travis and who am I missing? Derek, Jamie, all the folks, the administrators here in central office, the administrators at the building, the staff who take care of the kids every day, and for the parents who are here or at home watching. I know you care a great deal, and so do we, but thank you to all of you. My husband leaned over and said, whoa, they went pretty fast in terms of when we had the meeting at the Performing Arts Center to where you all are tonight. So thank you, and I know this is not even close to the only job that you have, so thank you so much for that. God bless you, Bill, for the buses.
All right, so with that, it is 6:30, so we'll end our time. However, I'll be sticking around if anyone just wants to talk after the meeting. But thank you all so much for coming. It really shows your dedication and your engagement, and we hope that, you know, the people at home appreciate the fact that you were here to ask the questions, because I was really afraid I was going to be talking at an empty room. So it was very helpful to have some of you here to ask your questions and give your ideas. So thank you.